The blonde-haired young man gently embraced the heroine of Selly. He quietly whispered words in her ear that seemed filled with mystery and promise, creating an atmosphere of special privacy and trust around them. He admitted that he thought he would never be able to truly love someone, but at one point a special girl appeared in his life. Looking into the eyes of the purple-haired lady, he asked why she was on his mind every second, and he was constantly thinking about her. The hero wanted her to never run away from him again, because he could not afford to lose control over her, otherwise something unpleasant might await her. The man who told her this was the emperor's only brother and the best in the entire empire, so he was treated with special respect. The main character was Archduke Venelucia Afron. It was he who occupied the place of the main character of this novel. The heroine, in turn, who did not deserve even a couple of lines in the novel, was a pathetic villain named Silenia Daphne, who was once abandoned by her lover, the one she trusted with all her soul. In a normal situation, they should never have gotten together, but according to the plot of the novel, she ran away one day because she could no longer tolerate such a relationship. At any cost, she had to achieve his true love, and she had been working towards this for too long, but the main character had no idea about the suffering she was experiencing. She put everything on the line so that the young man would fall in love not with the main character but with her too, because that was her true goal. And only in this way will she be able to get out of this terrible novel and also survive, because this was the only way to save herself. One day, opening her eyes, the main character realized Lady Silenia that she had found herself in a romantic fantasy novel called Thorns of the Chlorochian. This novel told the story of love that blossomed against the backdrop of the 11 Years' War between the protagonist, Archduke Venelucia, and the main character, Lucalina. Silenia, in turn, was reborn as a pathetic villain of a love story, rejected by the Duke himself. It was the unfortunate heroine who was destined for a tragic end, which this time she intended to avoid at any cost. But having been born under this name, she was happier than ever. One day, in the sunny estate of Daphne, a sweet lady and her husband stood next to the cradle of their daughter, and the mother could not believe what a beautiful girl they had, considering her a real gift of fate. The heroine had loving parents and a quiet life, and it seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble and only happy family warmth and all-encompassing love awaited her. The little girl dreamed of growing up and becoming a wonderful ruler of the lands like her father, and she did not understand why she needed these main characters at all, wanting to avoid contact with them so that her life would be wonderful. She believed that this happiness would last forever, but one day her life changed, and strangers came to the door of their happy home by order of His Majesty. No one expected the uninvited guests to appear, and as soon as they entered, the heroine realized that something terrible could happen. The father asked the people what had happened and why the emperor was looking for his daughter, but the young man also could not answer anything, only fulfilling his order. No one could believe that the emperor himself was looking for the girl, and at that moment, events were taking place in the palace of the capital of the empire that would change the girl's fate forever. The young men of the imperial order took Celia away with them and warned her not to dare utter a word until His Majesty addressed her personally. They brought her straight to the hall where the venerable emperor sat on a majestic throne, and sharp, cold swords were held out in front of the lady, as if she could harm him. The lady knelt before the emperor and greeted the son with the great empire, giving her name as Celia Daphne of the Daphne family. The emperor stared at the girl the knights had brought him, his eyes cold and penetrating, a mixture of power and mistrust. There was tension in the silence of the hall, and it seemed that all the emperor's power was concentrated in that look, and the first thing he asked was whether the girl was really a traveler. Celia had not expected the emperor to ask exactly this question, and with great surprise and some fear in her eyes, she asked what he meant. The emperor called her a time traveler again, and that meant she had to know what Chlorochian thorns were, because the emperor already knew that from somewhere. In the thorns of the Chlorochian, there are those who have broken the chain of cause and effect, and it is said that these people have extraordinary abilities due to reincarnation or entering another world. And they also have the power to overthrow even the greatest emperor. The young man admitted that he had been pouring water on the girl for several years and noticed that she was not at all following her predetermined destiny. At that moment, Celia felt as if she had been hit by a strong electric shock, and she remembered how far she had deviated from the plot, and only now did she realize that she had indeed not followed her predetermined destiny for a long time. According to the plot, she was supposed to have unrequited and devoted love for the main character, the Archduke, a gloomy young man named Venelucia with long blonde hair. No, moreover, she had to humiliate herself before him like a naive girl, but until now she had never even seen him and was not acquainted with him. Celia tried to figure out how the Emperor knew about the affair, since it definitely wasn't in the original plot, and he shouldn't have known anything about the Chlorochian thorns. The heroine was so afraid that she didn't know what to answer, and the Emperor even thought that since she was silent and didn't answer, it meant that he was right after all. An incredible fear gripped the girl, and trembling penetrated into the most secret corners of her soul, completely obscuring her mind and consciousness. The Emperor informed her, she must have already guessed, that he was that very thorn of the Chlorochian, and that is why he could not stand the time travelers, because they seemed to be a threat to his position. At that moment, Celia realized that she had fallen into the trap of Emperor Clifford Helios, a cruel and domineering man obsessed with power who had destroyed all of his relatives except the Archduke. He also spent his entire life tracking down the thorns of the Chlorochian, seeing them as a threat to his seat on the throne, which he did not want to lose at all. That is why attention fell on the girl, because she became that thorn, and she had no idea what the cruel emperor could do to her, because at the moment when she realized what situation she found herself in, horror gripped her completely. Perhaps she would soon die at the hands of the emperor, but for her it could be a miracle if only she died at his hands. But unfortunately, the emperor could harm her parents, and the heroine understood that she had to stop him as soon as possible, and Celia at that moment was very urgently trying to think of something. She had to think of something that would please the emperor, and then the girl remembered that the emperor's weakness was described in the novel. The emperor was afraid that his only relative would one day want to take his place and one day occupy the venerable throne of the empire. Archduke Venelucia was the only one who could challenge him. If he did, he would definitely win. When the emperor began to put pressure on the young man, the main character named Lucalina tried to protect him, but for this reason she was exiled to the front. After this, the Archduke, while waiting for the main character, began to deliberately date ordinary noblewomen so that the emperor would not see him as a threat. Eventually, after Lucalina returned, they, together with the Archduke, overthrew the cruel emperor, and the young man took his throne, becoming an impeccable ruler. The girl's hands were shaking, and she herself was still kneeling before the emperor and asked him to give her a little time, promising to make the Archduke love her forever. And after that, Celia was going to hand him a leash that would allow him to make the Duke's knight an obedient puppet forever, carrying out his orders. Hearing the words that the girl was going to make the Archduke fall in love with her, he thought seriously, because this was his only chance to remain on his throne. Finding this idea incredibly interesting, he looked at the time traveler Celia for some time, trying to figure out whether to believe her or not. The emperor stated that this would not be as easy to accomplish as she thought, since, unlike others, she did not know the true face of this man. He was also not sure that Celia would be able to surpass the heroine Lucalina, because this girl has many talents and only she was able to make the Duke fall in love with her later. Fortunately, Lucalina was currently at the front, and their friendly relationship, which had not developed into love, could well play into the main character's hands. His gaze was fixed on the girl, as if trying to penetrate into the depths of her soul, and in a cold voice he wished the girl good luck, hoping that she would become the Archduke's true lover. Thus, the heroine herself personally fell into the emperor's trap, and after that, as if mad, she began to study everything about the Archduke down to the smallest detail. His favorite food, perfumes, music and books, habits, prejudices, daily life, and places he often visited. Her parents were worried about her sudden changes, but she could do nothing, because she was just desperately clinging to life. And finally, the long-awaited moment arrived. When their first meeting took place at one of the imperial balls, the Archduke personally approached the girl and offered to do him the honor of dancing together. In the end, the heroine had her first chance, and she was not going to miss it at all, because for a long time she had been striving for his attention. His touch was gentle and respectful, their gaze met, and in the silence of the hall a special spark played, the beginning of a new story, filled with secrets and promises. That fine evening they danced for the first time, and Celia, without losing a second, immediately went on the offensive. While they entered into conversation, she tried to adapt to his every word. And now, finally, she had the chance to be alone with him, to finally make a good impression on him, and to show him the attention that he definitely could not refuse. Everything was going too smoothly then, and she even wondered if things would continue in the same spirit. She will still manage to escape the worst outcome and stay alive, But in the end, she only became a hostage to her own illusions. About 6 years passed and the heroine lived in the capital, in the main residence of Archduke Venelucci Afron. Celia sat at the table, immersed in reading a book, her eyes full of concentration and interest, and there was silence all around, broken only by the quiet rustle of pages. A young man approached her and, putting his hand on the book, asked the girl to go for a walk instead of boring reading, because he had found a place that she would definitely like. 6 years had passed since she had found herself next to him, and during that time their relationship had turned into something more, into true love, and now the life of the girl and her family was safe. Now all she needed to do was maintain this relationship, this love that no one doubted at all. The young man suggested going to a salon today, which the girl would definitely like because it was beautiful sunny weather outside. Celia spent 6 whole years with the Archduke, and even her old friend Luna, who hated all her suitors, liked him. The heroine named Luna was indeed Lucalina Elia, and Celia knew very well what future awaited her with her false lover. Lucalina was the main character, with whom the Archduke had to build a relationship in the future. He had not mentioned her for the last 6 years, but for some reason he remembered her recently. The young man promised to pick out a dress for his beloved that seemed to be created in the image of her smile, because when she smiled, his heart smiled with her. Celia tried not to worry because they had been dating the boy for 6 years already. The plot had been changed long ago, so even if the main character appeared, nothing should happen. The Archduke smiled and called Celie the most beautiful girl. His voice was warm and sincere, and his eyes sparkled with tenderness and respect. The lady smiled sweetly at him in return, and for all 6 years she retained a certain modesty and charm that was incredibly attractive to the young gentleman. Arriving at the luxurious salon, the Archduke immediately recommended that the girl try on one special dress, and the salon employees were already busy trying on the dresses. Looking at the snow-white robe, the heroine realized that she had already seen this particular dress somewhere, and probably in the previous version of the novel. The dress that the young man recommended, as soon as she saw it, she immediately remembered one girl. With bright silver hair, the main character of the novel named Lucalina, and it was she who was in this dress. The strange premonition did not deceive Celia at all, and when she looked at herself in the mirror in a snow-white robe, her heart was torn in different directions. The Duke's heart actually still belongs to the main character so much that even in a dress, he projected her image, and now the heroine wondered if she had really managed to win him over these 6 years. The young man deliberately dated many girls to divert the Emperor's suspicion, but for some reason Celia didn't even think that she could very well become one of them. And now she understood with bitterness in her soul that she could not even erase the shadow of the main character, and she had absolutely no idea what would happen when she returned from the front, and perhaps the novel would return to the original plot. In that case, the Emperor would get rid of her immediately, and would clearly consider her useless and unworthy of life. The heroine looked at her reflection in the mirror and tried to calm down, because she still had a little time to change everything. She knew she had to develop a completely different strategy to win the boy's heart forever and save her life. First of all, she should always follow the young man and become closer to him than family or friends, and her presence nearby should become as inseparable for him as breathing. And at one fine moment, when he gets completely used to it and decides to look around and try to find her, unfortunately, she will no longer be there. Lucalina was due to return in a year, and Celia knew that her return could change her destiny entirely. This should be enough time for her to become an irreplaceable part of the young man's life, without which he will never be able to live again. Early in the morning, she called her maid and ordered her to bring the young man freshly brewed aromatic coffee every day. But lowering her head, the maid said that she had something to tell her mistress about the Archduke. The next day, the heroine went to see Milady, who invited her to have tea with other Soviet ladies. Without hesitation, Celia went there, because this was the only way she could find out the latest gossip and details. The ladies of the court immediately noticed the heroine because Milady Daphne came alone this time, which meant that the rumors were true. Here she learned that the Duke had started dating another girl, and everyone thought that this time their relationship would be serious, but everything turned out to be completely different. Misfortunes never come alone, and as soon as the heroine felt the young man's alienation, he immediately began dating another, but this is exactly what she expected. When she came to tea, Celia unexpectedly learned the cruel truth that the young man had been hiding from her for a long time. The Archduke actually came with a new partner, while his real girlfriend sat at the next table and felt just awful. Everyone looked attentively at the arrival of the young man with another girl, and the ladies of the world, understanding the cruel situation in relation to Milady Daphne, truly considered her a poor and unhappy girl. And is there really no woman in the empire who could one day conquer the Archduke, so that his heart would belong only to her and he would never look at anyone else? Milady, who had organized the tea party, greeted the young man and his new companion and seated them at a table where there was hot, aromatic tea. She smiled and said that today the young man, as she saw, came with Milady Erdella, and they looked very good together, as if there was something alike in them. The one who attracted the most attention was Lady Daphne, whom everyone now felt sorry for, because besides, she had long since passed the age when it was customary to get married. The young man turned towards his real girlfriend and looked at her carefully, but she tried not to show that it really hurt her to see him with another. No matter how long it took, Celia was still going to follow her plan to stay alive, because the Archduke would no longer be able to escape from the nets she had set. The young man did not understand why his girlfriend was smiling, because she had just seen that he had come with another woman, and in his opinion, she should be furious. The night mist was descending over the Viscount Daphne's lounge house, where, after an unexpected tea party, Milady was looking sadly out of the window. Her eyes reflected the shadow of sadness and reflection. Behind the glass of the frame she saw a world filled with movement, but inside her there was silence and loneliness, and every minute seemed long to her, and her heart full of quiet experiences. The head maid came to the lady's door and asked if she was there, since the Archduke himself had arrived that evening on an unexpected visit. She reported his lordship's arrival, and it seemed he had learned that the girl had collected her things from the ducal estate and returned to her mansion. Celia knew she couldn't leave his lordship and wait outside, and asked the head maid to show him into the cozy guest reception room. As she emerged, she quietly apologized for the wait, saying that she simply needed to freshen up after a sleepless night. The young man sat down opposite her and with a serious face asked why she decided to leave today and collect all her things from his mansion. He assumed that the girl was probably angry because he had brought another partner, but Selina admitted that she was not angry at all because he had brought the woman he wanted, because she had no such right at all and it would have been inappropriate. On the contrary, in her opinion, they looked really good together, and it was probably destiny. She confessed that all this time it seemed to her that she was a great hindrance to the master, and when she saw the one who suited him better, she immediately understood that she had to give way to her. The Duke asked the girl not to say that, and admitted that he had acted impolitely today, but allegedly he had his own reasons, which he could not tell about now. Celia, with a sweet smile, thanked the gentleman for everything, for allowing her to find out what true warm love is, but now she decided that it was time to part. The gentleman looked in her direction silently, because he clearly did not expect the girl to say such serious words and make a final decision about breaking up. Now he wanted to know why, when he gave her so many gifts, she never took them home with her, but simply left them at the ducal estate. And was she really preparing for a breakup from the very beginning? But for Celia, his gifts were too valuable, and she simply did not dare to take them. The gentleman warned that he would never return to the one with whom he had broken up, and Sally knew this very well because she had lived with this man for a long time and asked not to worry, promising never to bother him in the future. After these words, the young man was once again convinced that it seemed that the girl had already decided everything for him. He had no choice but to turn around and leave her company forever. With special gratitude, Lady Celia bid his lordship farewell, hoping that a bright and wonderful future awaited him with another lady. The young man silently turned towards the exit, and the lady continued to sit humbly, understanding that she just needed to endure this moment. She already had a plan ready, and this step was necessary for a new beautiful flower to bloom. If the gods were still favorable to the heroine, this chance would definitely appear in the future, and thus the 6-year relationship between the Archduke and the village suddenly came to an end. A week later, at a knight's tournament, Venelucci trained with his rival, deciding to vent all his anger in training. His partner noticed that the gentleman had been looking very bad lately, so he immediately asked if something had happened in his life. The young man sternly asked Hamilton to stop looking at his wary face, because they were busy with something completely different. While Hamilton was saying these words, the Archduke chose an opportune moment and forcefully knocked the sword out of his opponent's hands. The opponent was defeated, and the Archduke declared that if he was so distracted during sparring, then next time it would not be the sword that would fly off, but his head. Has Hamilton forgotten what dangers can await him on the battlefield? because now it is just a regular training session where no one can harm anyone. Hamilton asked for forgiveness, promising to improve next time and be more vigilant and attentive during the nightly sparring. The commander ordered that double the amount of training be done today, and after these words he silently left the training ground. He wondered if it was so obvious that he looked bad, and that his heart was tormented by vague doubts, and his thoughts had become so angry that it was probably reflected on his face. It was funny for him to see himself in such a weak state, because all that had happened was a breakup, and he had been dumped by the woman with whom he had been in a relationship for many years. He decided that if he was tired from lack of sleep, it would be enough to just drink coffee, so after training he went to the Archduke's estate. After drinking freshly brewed coffee, the young man noticed that the taste of the coffee had changed greatly, and he wondered how his subjects looked after the beans. The young man admitted that the thing is that everything is fine with the grains, it's just that the method of preparing it has changed, which had always remained the same before. The butler said that when the young lady was here, she usually brewed coffee herself, and they preserved it with magic and served it, but unfortunately the coffee she made was gone. He heard that the lady used the cold water brewing method, but they had not yet adopted it. The Duke asked why they had not brewed it in the same way, and every word about Lady Celia made him even angrier. Quite some time had passed since she left, and the Duke was indignant that they could still brew regular coffee normally. He angrily ordered the butler to leave his office, and just 1 cup of coffee in the morning, prepared no earlier than that, drove him mad. The young man delved into himself for a long time and did not understand what had happened to him, because he was sure that everything would be in perfect order after her departure, and his life would not change at all. He didn't understand when it started, and didn't have time to notice how the girl became a part of his life, because at first he thought that she was just a cover for the emperor, and that he wouldn't even have to regret parting with her. Vanellucci was sure that everything was exactly like that, and when she spoke words of love to him, he understood that everything between them was not real, but now without her he experienced very strange sensations. Holding a cup of tasteless coffee in his hands, he tried to collect his thoughts, and even if he had feelings, he still couldn't get close to his ex-girlfriend. Once the emperor noticed this, she would immediately be in danger, and the situation was incredibly bad, but today was the imperial banquet that he couldn't miss. The Archduke came to the imperial banquet alone without a partner, which immediately provoked bewilderment among the ladies present, who clearly saw him with another woman at the tea party. Lady Daphne would hardly go to the royal banquet alone. Could it really be that they had broken up after that incident? And it was because of these rumors that the young man did not want to come. But the next moment, suddenly, all eyes turned to the exit, and the girls asked others to quickly pay attention to the couple who entered. They gasped in surprise and couldn't believe that something like this could actually happen. The heir of the Pendragon family and his partner named Lady Daphne arrived at the event, and no one was expecting their appearance together. And at that moment, after the breakup, he saw his ex-girlfriend with another man, and unexpected feelings for him surfaced in his heart, and unimaginable melancholy appeared on his face. The couple caused a storm of discussion among those present as the heir of the Pendragon family arrived with a new partner. And last time, Erxagrog showed up for tea with another girl, and many began to whisper that the couple, who had been in a long-term relationship, had actually broken up. His gaze settled on them silently and coldly, without expressing any emotion. Inside, he felt a sharp sense of disappointment and pain, but outwardly he remained motionless, like a statue. His eyes slowly slid over the pair of them, taking in every movement, every word, as if trying to understand how everything could have changed so quickly. The young man admitted that he had not seen his lordship for a very long time, and introduced him to his partner, Lady Daphne. The Archduke seemed not to hear the young man's words and turned to the girl, stating that he needed to talk to her right now. Bowing tenderly, the heroine admitted that today she came as the partner of the heir of the Pendragon family, so she could not leave him alone, and if the Duke had something to say, he could do it right in front of him. Not expecting such a turn of events from his ex, the young man grinned maliciously. He grabbed her hand abruptly and decided to do exactly as he wanted, not paying attention to the partner with whom she showed up at the event. He pulled the girl towards him and confidently declared that from that moment on, he was taking her with him, regardless of Mr. Pendragon's decision. Having moved to a quieter place, Vanellucci asked why the hell the girl had come with the heir of the Pendragon family, and whether she really wanted to provoke him in this way. But the lady merely replied modestly that she had in no way intended to provoke him, and that it had not even occurred to her. The young man tried to figure out why all this was happening and decided to ask again if it really wasn't because of that incident at the tea party when he came with another girl. If she's doing this because she thinks he's close to Lady Luminina, she's wrong. But the heroine never thought that, and even if that were the case, she's certainly not in a position to say anything about it right now. The hero clearly understood that Celie, for some reason, had drawn a sharp line between their relationship. Out of anger, he even accidentally squeezed her hand tighter, but immediately let go and asked for forgiveness for his rude actions. He took a glass bottle with red liquid out of his pocket and was about to do something with the magic potion. The heroine looked intently at the young man and waited to see what he was going to do next. It was the same potion that could revive the dead, but it was too generous to take it on the one with whom he had parted, because she was not so badly hurt. Now it didn't matter to the gentleman at all, and he asked her to consider it a simple expression of his regret, because she was probably in a little pain. Was she lucky because he responded much faster than she even imagined, and right now she wanted to throw herself into his arms and be convinced of his love. But now she needed to act clearly according to her plan, so she abruptly pulled her hand away. Celia, frowning, asked his lordship's forgiveness and confessed that he should never worry about her again. The heir of Siberia Pendragon was probably already waiting for her, so with the Duke's permission, the girl decided to leave. It was as if he didn't want to let her go, and was still holding her hand, suddenly saying that he knew how much she wanted to marry him, and now he just wanted to talk about it. The lady's gaze became wary, and she stopped for a moment because she heard such words from the young man for the first time. If he asked her to marry him, her goal would finally be achieved, and in that case, she would be able to survive, so the heroine should have immediately agreed, because that was what she wanted. She finally understood what this strange feeling was, but she screamed that the Archduke probably already had a loved one. She wasn't going to name her, but he had to figure out for himself who she was talking about, his childhood friend named Lucalina. The only person who stood up for him when the Emperor intended to send the Archduke to war was she, who had already been paying for 11 years with service on the battlefield. She probably shouldn't have said it, but she said that the young man loved her because 6 years of living together had erased the old fear, and in its place completely new feelings were born in his heart. Venelucci replied that if he really loved Luna, then why would he meet with her? But the heroine knew that he was trying to protect her from the Emperor, but she could not say these words out loud. She couldn't live like this anymore and was too upset to say something that could never be corrected, so the heroine decided to collect her thoughts and asked for forgiveness for the inappropriate words today. With his permission, she warned him once again that she was going to leave and walked towards the door. But the young man did not want to let her go and shouted for Sally to wait, and if she wanted to play this damn wedding so much, then he was ready to do everything. The heroine asked him to repeat his words, because the gentleman himself had just said that he was ready to marry her. But perhaps he didn't even suspect that for the last 6 years of their life together, she had been bending over backwards solely for this. For the heroine, marriage was not just a formality, but a real connection between people who would never betray or abandon each other again. She had long noticed his careless attitude towards marriage, so she angrily declared that she would rather marry the first man she met than become his wife. The young man really didn't expect to hear such words, because he was sure that any girl would agree to the marriage proposal as soon as she heard about it. For the first time, the heroine poured out all her true feelings on him, but returning home to the place of relief, she felt only regret, because on the young man's face, filled with sadness because of her caustic words, she read that he would refuse her. And this was after what she had heard earlier from the Emperor. But 2 days later, something changed in her life. A guest came to visit the lady and said that they had not seen each other for a very long time. For some reason, at such an unexpected hour, His Majesty the Emperor came to her, but Celia did not expect to see him in her house. She knelt before him and, expressing special respect, she expressed her respect for the great lord. The Emperor said that fortunately, it seemed that the girl had not forgotten him at all, and probably even knew why he had come. The heroine could not actually forget their recent conversation for a second, but she reflected it with her whole body in front of the Emperor. The Emperor reported that Celie probably knew that there was only a year left until Lucalina's return. These words sounded like a terrible warning, and each letter of these words ran a terrible chill through her body. A warning that if Lucalina returns and makes the Archduke fall in love with her again, there will be a reprieve, the data will run out, and she has 1 year to do everything. The heroine knew perfectly well and asked the Emperor to trust her, promising to completely win his heart before her arrival, and the separation was part of the plan. The emperor wanted to suggest a way to make this plan even more perfect, which is why he came on a personal visit. In high society, it is well known that the young Count Pendragon and his Grace the Archduke are sworn enemies, and to become his partner means to become the Archduke's enemy. The heroine asked for forgiveness for her insolence, but all this was done only to make her ex-lover jealous. The emperor grinned and said that it seemed that the heroine had grown bolder during the time they had not seen her, and had even begun to object. But if someone else in her place had objected to the great emperor, he would have undoubtedly cut off his head. But with this girl, everything was different. He gently touched her chin, forcing her to look him straight in the eyes to understand what she was really hiding. The emperor confessed that he had not at all thought that Sally would cope with her task so well, even though on Wednesday she was a fragile, innocent lady. But her patience was as strong as steel, and she reminded him of a well-honed blade. And at times the emperor even felt sorry to give her to Archduke Venelucia, such a wise and courageous girl. He knelt down in front of her on one knee and looked closely into her trusting eyes, while Sally only tried to stop herself from trembling. And was what he had just said true? And if she failed the task, he was going to torment her for the rest of her life, keeping her close. Making the Empress a heroine only in words, in reality putting into her words a warning that in case of failure, the thorn of the Cloracian will keep her close, watching and using. And also tormenting as he pleased and breaking for his own pleasure, because for him she was just a convenient tool, so she lay down and screamed that she was not going to fail under any circumstances. The heroine spoke to the emperor with such a serious face that the emperor even felt offended. After all, he kindly suggested that there was another way to survive, even if she failed. It had only happened 2 days ago, and the heroine had prayed that he would never find out about what had happened earlier between her and the Archduke, and the thought made her feel incredibly sick. The emperor didn't need a toy in the form of Selenia, who couldn't do her job properly. After meeting the emperor, the heroine seemed to have her breath taken away, and there was absolutely nothing to breathe with while his words were spinning in her head. When the headmaid entered her room, she wanted to ask her mistress to go to bed early. But she saw a terrible picture. A girl was lying on the floor, her whole body was shaking, and she was not breathing at all, while the maid asked the mistress to wake up. Opening her eyes after the strange incident, she saw the familiar face of Venelucci in front of her, who asked how she was feeling. Turning away, she asked why the young man had come there, but he found out that she had lost consciousness and immediately went to her house. He looked at Sally with a languid gaze and wanted to know what had really happened, what had led the girl to such a state. According to the headmaid, the lady fainted and she was unable to call the priest, so she asked the master for help. As soon as the young man learned that the girl had suddenly fainted, he became incredibly scared for her health, because this definitely could not have happened just like that. The girl's condition turned out to be much more serious than he thought. She fainted due to extreme stress and a panic attack. It was only when he saw her suffering because of her that he finally realized that he wanted to protect her, putting everything he had on the line. When the priest left, he said that the girl needed a long rest and promised the young man to stay close until she woke up. He rushed over as soon as he heard that she had fainted, and Sally certainly did not expect this. At that moment, when she heard these words, it was strange, but instead of being comforted by the thought that she would be able to take a short break from the emperor, she felt relieved that 6 years of effort had not been in vain. The gentleman's assistant approached the closed door and announced that he had an urgent message that he was obliged to report. The young man asked him to leave as he was busy at the moment, but the assistant persistently tried to tell him something. It was stunning news, and suddenly Lady Lucalina returned from the front. The heroine could not believe it. There was still another year left before she returned. And did it all happen because the main character changed the course of the original, and now everything could go completely wrong according to the plot? If they do come together, as in the original, Sally will be rendered useless to the emperor, who will no longer have any point in keeping a pawn around who is unable to fulfill her role. But in any case, she understood that she needed to prevent this, no matter what the cost. The news of Lady Elihan's return left the young master dumbfounded, as he had not expected it either. In a quiet voice, the heroine asked him to go, because she was the one he had been waiting for a long time. She asked him not to worry about her and just leave, because he was looking forward to meeting this girl who had returned from the front so unexpectedly. Celia turned away and thanked him for his concern, stating that she needed to rest a little more. Without thinking, the young gentleman headed toward the exit, promising to return later, but the heroine understood that now her fate would change dramatically. She couldn't do anything, because now that the original plot would change, she had to prepare for what needed to be done. The Archduke feels a great debt to Lucalina, who was exiled to the outskirts due to the Emperor's hatred. She sided with him, so he could not help but go. But the mystery remained as to why Lucalina returned a year earlier than in the original, and whether there was any difference from the book she read. It was also strange that the Emperor knew of her existence, and even that she was a thorn of the Chlorochian. Because of this, the heroine became the Emperor's puppet, and is now forced to make the Archduke fall in love with her at any cost, no matter what. And did the future really change so much at one moment because she acted differently than described in the original novel? And what if, when she fights for her life every time, hoping to do everything right, everything doesn't go according to plan? This is precisely what becomes the shortest path to her death, which certainly awaits her. The Archduke returned to his estate, awaiting the arrival of the girl who, precisely because of him, spent a long time at the front, fighting and surviving. But he couldn't stop thinking about the goal, because for all those 6 years that they were lovers, he thought that their relationship had become strong. That is why it was even more dangerous, because the stronger the feelings became, the more the Emperor suspected, so the hero chose this method, to come differently and drink with another lady. Then his appearance gave rise to many rumors, which certainly first reached the Emperor himself. And the pain Celia felt at that moment was something that hardly anyone could even describe in words. But after that, the path to the girl's heart was closed to him forever, and for some reason, he did not understand this earlier, that it hurt her, who knew nothing about the reasons for his stupid act. The young man felt extremely terrible, and his carriage was already at the gates of the estate. His thoughts were confused, but he knew one thing: now he needed to go to Lady Lucalina as soon as possible. To her, forced to go to the battlefield because of the Emperor's hatred, caused by the fact that she once decided to take his side. The carriage slowly approached the estate of Marquis Elihan, which was where Lucalina should be now. The young man slowly crossed the threshold of the palace and was met by a respectable lady with whom they were already acquainted. The lady in the beautiful emerald dress was Lady Lucalina's mother, and she greeted His Grace the Archduke with great respect. The young man asked if the lady must have been suffering all this time, and he admitted that the blame for everything that happened lay entirely with him. But the lady replied that while her daughter was away from the capital, the young man constantly took care of them without stopping. And if her daughter went to the battlefield just to defend her beliefs, then he shouldn't worry at all. The character of the Marquise Elihan remained the same virtuous, and Venelucci only thanked her for her sincerity. After her husband died in an accident, she was left with a precious daughter whom she raised with special love and attention. She raised her alone, and one day the only girl went to war precisely because of him, but she still doesn't blame anyone, and even finds the strength within herself to console him. Venelucci didn't know how he could thank them for everything they had done for him, because this lady and the little girl had helped him so much. Finally, the young man heard a familiar female voice from afar, and he realized that she had finally seen him. A radiant blonde lady stood on the balcony and joyfully announced that the gentleman had finally arrived. An incredible amount of time had passed since their last meeting, but for the girl, this meeting was as if time had not separated them at all. She threw herself into the arms of the young gentleman, saying that she had missed him incredibly all this time. The young man admitted that he was very glad that she returned home safe and sound, and that they really had not seen each other for a very long time. Looking into his sad eyes, the lady asked whether he shouldn't be much more cheerful, whether he wasn't at all glad to see her. Ben couldn't even find the words to answer, but just stood silently, looking at the moon. And the next second, he only languidly lowered his gaze without uttering a single word. Luna could not understand what had happened to the young man, because this was definitely the Lucalina he had been yearning for many years. She tried to touch him, and even suggested that the young man was probably ill and not feeling well. As soon as she touched him, she felt a sharp cold, and Benny carefully removed her hand from himself. The lady stood there in bewilderment, because this was absolutely not what she expected from the long-awaited meeting. Lucalina was his first strong love, the girl he considered his future companion, and a comrade with whom they would go through fire and water no matter what. His world, filled with these words, changed completely after meeting another girl named Selenia. In order not to repeat the same fatal mistake as before, the young man decided that he had to say it right now and ask the girl for forgiveness. They stood looking at each other as before, but something different was now read in the young man's gaze, and he was very sorry. But he found the strength to say the most important words, that he no longer had feelings for her and did not love her. The young man admitted that he was ashamed at the time that she had suffered so much because of him, and promised to do everything possible to compensate for this, but Luna noticed the expression on Ben's face, and now he avoided even casual touches. The young man said that a girl had appeared whom he truly loved, so he would not be able to be with Luna as before. He thought that he was obliged to say this in person when they met, and now after these words he was about to leave. All this time, Lady Celia could not find a place for herself, because there was still no news from the Archduke, who had gone to Lucalina. She was sure that they would certainly not now fill the gap that had formed during their separation and become lovers again. If in the end everything goes according to the original, then she will face a cruel punishment from the Emperor. The heroine was already feeling a little better. At that moment, the head maid entered the room to check her condition. It was quite chilly outside, and the maid was worried that the girl had not yet recovered from her illness and had been standing by the window for a long time. The sun was shining through the window with its warm rays, so Celia didn't feel unwell at all. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound coming from outside the window and looked out of it with alarm. Right on the windowsill sat a small black bird, knocking with its beak right on the glass of her room. The strange bird continued to sit by the window and knock on the glass with its beak, as if it knew something and wanted to enter this particular room. Looking at the mysterious creature, the heroine remembered that it seemed she had already seen this bird somewhere before. The little black bird had red eyes and kept tapping on the window, trying to say something. The lady confessed to the nanny that she suddenly felt tired and decided to rest, asking to be left alone. The maid noticed that the girl's voice was trembling, but she could not resist her wishes and asked her to have a good rest and gain strength. The heroine knew perfectly well that the very bird near the window was not just a bird, but a real person. Falling to her knees, she greeted the great son of the empire, and now he was right in her room. The emperor was surprised that even in the form of a bird, she still recognized him and understood who he was. The young man admitted that he definitely liked the lady, but why, being so smart, did she not think of stopping Venelucia from going to Lucalina today? The heroine understood that the emperor had come precisely for this reason, because he knew everything immediately as soon as it happened. The emperor understood that the heroine was probably so scared that she herself apparently did not understand that she had done the wrong thing. He admitted that he was thinking of showing her leniency and giving her some more chances to correct her fate. To begin with, he asked her to get up from her knees, because he had learned about the girl's poor health, and a sick person only needs to observe decency for a moment. Rising from her knees, the lady thanked the gentleman but did not know whether this could be called that very condescension. But at least now she didn't have to be grateful that his indulgence had prolonged her life. Now that Lucalina had returned, the emperor decided to give the girl two options to choose from. The first option is to immediately receive confirmation from Venelucia of his sincere and great love for her. Celia understood that it would be simply unrealistic to receive confirmation of his love when the main character finally returned. But if this option does not suit her, the emperor offered another one, and the heroine had to become friends with Lucalina Elihan herself. Having become close to this girl, she could observe her actions every moment and be confident in the further development of events. The emperor wanted her to keep an eye on the Archduke, not hesitating to use any methods. And if they suddenly enter into a conspiracy, the heroine should immediately kill Lady Lucalina in order to save her own life. These words sent huge shivers down the heroine's spine because the emperor had just said that she would have to kill an innocent man. She asked again, trembling all over, if she really had to kill this girl with her own hands without blinking an eye. The emperor asked if something was bothering the girl, and she did not want to obey his order, since this was the only way to stay alive. Even though the heroine was a Chlorochian thorn, she was an ordinary person with no special abilities, and it would be difficult for her to deal with a talented swordsman like Lady Alihan. She begged him not to force her to carry out this order, but the emperor had already decided everything for her long ago, because Celia was just a pawn in his cruel game. The emperor stated that if the reason was that the girl would not be able to kill her, he had a solution that could help her. Extending his hand to her, he gave the girl something that could probably help in the murder of the young lady. There was a small black bag lying on the floor, tied with black thread. That was what should have done the job. Having unfolded the bag, the girl took out from there an ordinary, unremarkable ring. But if you turn the stone in the center, a small blade will appear, which is smeared with the most powerful poison in the empire. And here all that was left was to do one small thing, just use this ring for its intended purpose, unnoticed and unexpectedly, so that no one could suspect her. The heroine was worried that if the Marquise's family found out about this, not only she would suffer, but also her family. But this poison was used only in the imperial family, so no one could expose it. The poison was not instantaneous, its duration of action lasted up to a year, while the person would slowly wither away and then die as if from an illness. The emperor placed the ill-fated ring on the girl's finger, promising to fulfill what he had told her earlier. He promised to give Celia Daphne a certain position in which no one would dare to lay a finger on her. But only if he succeeded in killing Lucalina, and his sudden promise, although it meant ensuring safety by making her empress in case something went wrong. For the heroine, this sounded like a threat, because such a life after him would be no different from real slavery. At the estate, the Archduke decided to go into the room where his girlfriend had lived for 6 years, but he had not realized one thing before. Once he offered her to go to a pastry shop where Luna often went, he was sure that she would like it too, but each time the girl refused. And only now did he realize how much his inattention had hurt her, because he constantly mentioned Luna's name. The young man could not stop thinking that he wanted his girlfriend Celie back and was ready to do anything just to have her with him again. The gentleman met Celia shortly after he returned to the capital from the battlefield, but here his older brother, who had always found his existence a nuisance, intervened. He sent Lucalina to war and warned her that her life now depended solely on his behavior. In the end, in order to calm his brother, who was also a terrible tyrant, he had to pretend to be a womanizer. But I meet a lot of ladies, and the young man never had sincere feelings for any of them. No matter how many ladies, sweet and cheerful, surrounded him, his thoughts were always occupied with only one. It was then that, as if out of nowhere, that very Selenia appeared, who awakened feelings in him and melted his heart. She appeared as if from nowhere. She was sweet and short, but just from her presence, everything inside the young man turned over and his soul became warm. One day the young man confessed that she had one single request that she would like to convey. In 3 years of their relationship, this was the first time the young man had heard something like this. And was it really the first time that Celie had decided to ask him for something? He replied that she could ask for anything, since this was her first request, and while he was on the hike, the girl would like to go home to her relatives. He was ready to order the meadow to collect some jewelry and decorations for her, because she was going to her parents after a long separation. She couldn't go empty-handed, but modest Celie refused his offer. He asked her again if she was sure of her words, and Celia was absolutely sure and did not want to take anything with her. Having set off on the hike, the young man promised to see her as soon as possible and wished her a good journey and a meeting with his family. But from that day on, Celia suddenly disappeared for a whole month, and the young man had absolutely no idea where she was. There was no news from her for a long time, and if it had been another lady, he would not have paid any attention to her, but his thoughts were always absorbed in thoughts of her, and one day she appeared again, only after 2 months. The girl greeted the gentleman warmly and was glad that he had returned safely from that terrible battle. She came 2 months later and didn't even explain her presence, but for some reason her unperturbed appearance made the gentleman incredibly angry. When she was nearby, every second he wanted to shout where she had been all this time, but he tried to restrain himself and remain silent. While she was absent, due to great anxiety about her and the lack of news, the young man could not find a place for himself. The hero ordered to find out what really happened because he wanted to know the whole truth. As it turned out, she had been arguing with the Viscount and Viscountess over the issue of marriage, but she hadn't even let him know it. He hadn't realized it all then, but now it was different. She didn't treat him like a lover she could rely on, and that was why he was incredibly upset. For some reason, now the gentleman considered himself a fooled, but at that moment the butler unexpectedly announced that the young lady Citron wanted to see him. Rosiana Sturgeon met the gentleman when Celie left for the Daphne estate, and there was no news from her. She just happened to visit the gentleman at that moment, and they just had a little pleasant conversation. At that moment, she came into the view of reporters, which caused a major scandal. All the newspapers trumpeted about it, so Celie could not have missed the information. But even then, she still remained nearby. And again today, Lady Citron decided to visit the gentleman, and he immediately asked what brought her. The girl immediately decided to speak directly, admitting that she would like to take a seat next to the gentleman. The young man did not immediately understand what it all meant, because they had only seen each other once and just talked. The lady heard that Lady Alicon had returned from the battlefield, so at least until the two of them announced their relationship, she would like to have the honor of washing his lover a little. It was all too strange, and the gentleman wondered how she knew at all that Luna had returned so soon. The news of the victory had not yet been officially announced. In order to avoid a possible assassination attempt, only family members and close friends knew about Luna's return. So no one else could know that she had returned from the front, but somehow it had already become known. The young man asked how the girl knew about this, but for a moment she only fell silent. The answer was obvious, and most likely she learned of her return from His Majesty the Emperor, who was the first to be informed about it. The young man instantly became angry and did not even give the lady the right to explain anything about this. He stated that there was no point in continuing the conversation any longer, and if the information she had received came out, she would have to prepare for retribution, so the lady needed to keep her mouth shut. He said that he would forgive her for her insolence today, and turning angrily, he asked her to leave the palace immediately. The next day, the newspaper that the young man ordered to be printed was never published. So there were now rumors among the aristocrats about a renewed relationship between him and Lady Citron. Just because they met, the same thing happened as in the past, and rumors began to circulate despite the ban on printing the newspaper. That someone had planned this, someone with more power than the Duke, the young man was sure of it, and he immediately understood that this was the work of the Emperor himself. He did not understand why his brother continued to ruin his life and decided to meet him immediately, ordering him to prepare for a trip to the imperial palace. But at that moment, an assistant approached the young man and informed him of the arrival of a guest who would like to see him right now. That same moon appeared on the threshold, with blue heavenly eyes and snow-white wavy hair. She approached Ben, saying that she would like to talk to him a little, and asked him to spare at least a little time to discuss something. After that day, they never saw each other again, and the girl decided to visit the gentleman herself. He wondered if something had happened and prepared to listen to her story. Luna noticed that the young man had been keeping his distance from her lately and assumed that it was all because of the Emperor. While she was on the battlefield by order of His Majesty, she was not only engaged in fighting. Mother, who remained in the capital, distracted the Emperor's attention in every possible way. While she was alone on the battlefield, she attracted many people to their side, who would later become their reliable support and strength. Luna said that she now had the power to resist the Emperor, and didn't he want to bring down this cruel man with her? Although they were not on the best terms now, and sometimes the Emperor made them feel indignant, but since childhood in that cold palace, they had been each other's only support. The father, not paying attention to the death of his mother, was busy only with spending time with his beautiful concubines. He constantly reproached his children for having inherited only bad qualities from their mother, and he hated the two boys to such an extent that he mocked them every day, locking them in a room, although he had many other children besides them. The boys lived through those years in horror, and the brother eventually won the struggle for power, destroying the other brothers and sisters. During the process, the brother suffered greatly, and even his character changed greatly, but the Archduke could not simply betray him just because of this. He confessed to Luna that the girl had misunderstood something similar and that she needed to know something else. He had no intention of killing his older brother, no matter how bad their relationship was now, because he was his only blood and comrade, with whom we had not gone through fire and water together. Then Luna decided to change the question and asked if it was really because of the village of Daphne that he had changed so much. The young man's expression instantly changed when he heard her name, and Luna probably already understood everything. Taking a mug of aromatic tea and taking a sip, she admitted that her assumptions were probably indeed correct. She stated that the young man did not love the girl at all, and their feelings could not be called real. But the young man insisted that his feelings were deep and sincere, and Luna absolutely could not say such things to his face right now without knowing any details. At least in the future that Luna knew he didn't do that. Suddenly the girl told Ben that she had gone back 5 years and learned a lot of new things about the life of him and his girlfriend. She revealed that she was a Chlorochian thorn, and now they knew absolutely everything that had happened before. The young man wondered if Luna was the one who was only a legend. That's why she didn't end the war right away, but dragged it out. And it was there that she gathered the people who sided with them, and she was sure that the young man should choose her. They must unite, and only in this way can they both survive. Otherwise the insidious Emperor will do his job, and the young man will one day simply die at the hands of his own brother. Nen couldn't believe that Luna's glory was really true, because his brother treated him the same as before, because they were of the same blood. Luna tried to prove herself to Ben, and she understood perfectly well that he did not believe her words. But she knew that in exactly 2 years, in order to take the throne, Ben would start a battle with his own brother, and it would last a long time and end in his defeat. They will end up losing this battle and will then die at the hands of the emperor, together and forever. Ben had no desire to take the throne at all, so he was not going to start a battle with his brother, because he was sure that his older brother did not want to kill him either. Luna asked the young man to wake up and face the truth, because it was the emperor who constantly sent him to war, and he used every opportunity to kill his own brother. One day, he and his brother were playing chess in the imperial palace, and the emperor brought up a very strange topic. Suddenly, he suggested to his brother to go on a campaign, declaring that this was an imperial order which he dare not disobey. But naive Ben believed that if this is what his older brother wanted, he was ready to do just that. The emperor assured him that his brother should understand him and that he did not wish him death at all, trying to convince him. After all, in his opinion, later his brother will definitely say thank you for the fact that he was once sent to war. At the time, Ben thought it was just a cunning plan to kill him, quietly and without a trace. In the end, his words turned out to be true, and the boy who was laughed at as the emperor's snotty younger brother. He began to be known as a hero who had distinguished himself in the war and was able to increase his political support. But as long as he himself could not raise a rebellion against the emperor, the sword between the brothers would not be drawn. The words Luna said were said only out of concern for the boy's life, but he could say one thing for sure. So far, the older brother is not going to kill him, and he is unlikely to be able to do so in the near future. One day, Ben saw how he killed his brothers and sisters with his own hands in order to finally take the great throne. Then the brother assured that now no one would dare to hurt his little brother anymore because he risked his life to protect him. And no matter how much the young man hated him now, he would never be able to point a sword at his own brother. Luna became flustered and admitted that she really didn't want to have this conversation. But she knew that Dam loved her very much, so in the future he chose his side for me, and the side of the moon. Besides, for his sake, she visited the battlefield. Ben was grateful to Luna for this act, and it would take a long time to repay him for his entire life. But the future she knew, in his opinion, must definitely be different from the present. He confessed that he was incredibly in love with another girl named Selenia, so the future was bound to change. Luna didn't know what this could lead to, and asked if he was sure that after these actions he would not regret anything. She was sure that the girl was just desperately clinging to the master, and unfortunately she couldn't help him in any way, but Luna could be there and protect him. An assistant came to the door and reported an urgent message to the gentleman regarding Madame Daphne. The young man stood up from his seat, and Luna was unhappy about something because they still hadn't finished speaking. He apologized for his hasty departure, stating that it was too urgent a matter for him, promising to talk another time. The young man did not explain anything more and headed towards the exit to find out what had happened. Without any idea what was going on, the young man thought with horror that something might have happened to Selly. To his great surprise, his assistant reported terrible news: Viscount Daphne had just died in a carriage accident. They say the carriage overturned due to the slippery road, and hearing a rumor that his daughter, Lady Selenia, had broken up with the Duke, he hurried to her and ended up with something terrible happening. For the Viscount, the news of separation from his only, dearly beloved daughter, who insisted on a relationship with him despite his fierce resistance, must have been a great shock. That is why, even despite the terrible thunderstorm, he still ordered the carriage to be prepared and decided to leave in the dark. His daughter ran through the forest trying to find her father's carriage, not noticing the pouring rain and cold weather. A nanny ran after her with an umbrella, worried that the lady might catch a cold and her health would deteriorate again. But Selly didn't care at all, and she just wanted to find her father, and she didn't feel the rain or the cold at all. The headmaid tried to calm the girl down, saying that it wasn't her fault, but the lady was already nervous, because now she only blamed herself. The heroine could not believe that her father had really died, and how this could have happened at all. She was lying on the cold ground, and cold drops of rain were falling on her, and suddenly she heard her mother's voice. The lady approached her daughter, and there was an inexpressible sadness on her face, and she said only a few words, from which the girl's heart broke into small pieces. She stated that she hated her daughter, and was probably sure that everything that happened was her fault. One day, opening her eyes, the heroine discovered that she had been reborn as Selenia Daphne, but perhaps thanks to her parents' love, the life from her past life soon faded, and she began to get used to her new happiness. Dad constantly spoiled his little daughter with gifts, and every time he bought her something to please her. One day he brought her a pink doll that she had wanted for a long time, and for the girl, her father was the most loving and best. Her parents were always a reliable support, so the heroine dreamed of a different future, in which, if she ever manages to escape from the clutches of the emperor, she will live peacefully with her parents in her estate, but this will remain only an unrealizable dream. Now the mother hated her daughter, because she alone was the cause of this terrible tragedy. Looking at her mother with frightened eyes, the heroine did not understand why she had suffered such a terrible fate. Heroine was sure that everything should be different, but her mother hated her overnight. The lady understood that they were both crushed by incredible grief, but Sally could not understand why all the blame now fell on her. She considered herself guilty of not having listened to her parents' pleas to part with His Serene Highness the Archduke. Her father, who came to stop her, had an accident for this very reason, and died because of her, so her mother now hated her with all her soul. Her father had died suddenly, and now there were too many things to settle that no one had ever thought of before. She turned to her daughter. Instead of crying bitterly, she urgently needed to get down to business. At that moment, the heroine instinctively understood that she would never see such a loving and caring attitude from her mother again. She will never be able to return to those happy times when every smile of her father and mother was incredible happiness for her, and for this she lived. Now an incredible darkness, bitterness, sadness, and regret descended upon their place, which could not be changed. That evening, the mother sat down opposite her daughter and asked her to return to the estate for permanent residence. Since her father had died and she had finally separated from that man, her mother understood that perhaps she still could not forget him. Sally didn't know at all what to think, because she had long been confused in her feelings, and most of all, she was afraid of the emperor's wrath. Mother only asked not to disappoint her even more, but suddenly sadly announced the arrival of His Serene Highness the Archduke. They say that he must definitely meet his mistress Selenia, and until he meets her, he will not move from this place. Mother angrily glanced to the side at the door, realizing that behind it stood the very man who had caused the scandal in their family. She did not want to see him, but she could not help it, and asked the maid to show his lordship to the reception room on the first floor. Celia came out to the master without her mother, who began preparing for the immediate funeral. The young man only quietly said the word "forgive me," and the lady did not understand at all why he decided to say that. For some reason, the young man was sure that everything happened because of him. If only he had assured her of his feelings earlier, everything could have turned out differently. The young man persistently decided to compensate for the moral damage and pain that the girl had been experiencing for a long time. She didn't understand what he meant, but suddenly the young man put his hand on hers and proposed marriage. For some reason, he was sure that the wedding would help her and her mother stay on better terms, but Sally didn't even want to hear about it. Celia screamed. Her father's death couldn't just be made up for, and her dead father certainly didn't want to know that. The young man asked the girl to talk to him, because she knew perfectly well what he meant, and apologized for the wrong choice of words. He admitted that he just wanted to take their relationship back and make it like it was before. He said how sincerely he loved her, and his words were the purest truth, and the heroine had never heard these words from him before. Sally didn't understand. The main character had returned. Why then he suddenly decided to come to her again and confess his incredible love? The emperor had been keeping an eye on the Archduke and Lucalina, and the young man probably needed a smokescreen again, so the lady told him that she knew the reason why he, out of complete dislike, kept his past lovers close. She said that the emperor was keeping a close eye on them, which is why they needed cover. The heroine received many gifts from the young men in the capital, so if he ordered, she would always obey, and she just wanted him to lie to me about love. While the young man did not understand why she did not believe his words, the heroine knew that if she did not keep the promise given to His Majesty, she could die and her mother would be left truly alone. She didn't want her mother, who loved her so much, to experience such severe pain again. And above all, she couldn't let 6 years of effort go to waste, so no matter what, she had to see the plan through to the end. Now that Lucalina has returned a year early, things can no longer be allowed to go according to the original. Celia replied that she would accept his lordship's offer, but would not delude herself into creating illusions so that he would not worry. The young man admitted that he had deliberately met with young ladies in order to divert the emperor's gaze from himself, but he had always been sincere towards her. But to be more honest, he was curious how she would react to seeing him with another girl. Sally seemed to be always there, but it turned out that she was always thinking about something else, and he just wanted to make sure if she really loved him. The heroine never broke the promise she made on their first night, and truly loved him with all her heart. For 6 years she tried her best to please him, and he decided to test her in such an arrogant way, and he was the one who broke his promise. The situation when there is the moon, he also needed the love of another girl, but she could give him this love whenever she wanted, and asked the young man to stop playing his games. He wanted to take her hand, but the girl still remained cold towards him. Sally considered this question meaningless, and the word love could no longer exist between them. All the same, this relationship began solely for mutual benefit, and there is no place for real, sincere feelings. A real thunderstorm broke out over the estate, and the gloomy black sky became more and more terrible. The heroine went to her mother as quickly as possible, but she was indignant it turned out to be much longer than she thought. She decided to ask again about that conversation, whether she was really going to return to Daphne's domain. Celia wondered what she should do now, since His Majesty the Emperor would hardly allow her to stay in the domain, but she could not tell the truth to anyone. Mother was sure that if she did not become the head, the room would go to someone who was completely unprepared to manage their lands. Her mother and father prepared their daughter to become a good ruler of the lands, and they trained her from childhood, and she knew this very well. And is she really now going to abandon the estates that her father loved so incredibly, and into which he invested enormous efforts, resources, and his whole soul? Until then, the mother had turned a blind eye to her daughter's debauchery, but since it had happened, she was sure that her daughter would definitely have to return to her domain, if only for the sake of their late father and his memory, which they must now carefully keep in their hearts. The carriage accident was an unfortunate incident, but if the heroine decides to follow the young man to the capital, then the mother will no longer be able to love the daughter who abandoned the estate that she and her father loved so much. Her nanny noticed that the girl looked very bad and tried to ask how she could help her. The maid prepared some porridge, because the lady still had not eaten anything since returning. The heroine was surprised how the maid knew about this porridge, since it was the first time she had cooked it. In fact, this porridge was given to her by His Serene Highness the Archduke, who said that the lady loved it very much. She dismissed the maid, who asked her to call her when the mistress had finished her delicious dinner. Now, in front of the heroine stood a plate of the same porridge that she always had for breakfast at the Archduke's estate. This was the kind of porridge she had prepared on the day when the young man was unusually weak, a dish she had impulsively cooked. After this porridge, he really felt much better. The young man immediately felt better. This porridge contained the very warmth that emanated from it, and it seemed to warm both the body and the soul. Caring for the sick, the perfect temperature. Now she understood why his lordship's actions turned everything inside her upside down. All this long time she loved him incredibly. They had a wonderful relationship, full of care and mutual understanding. She had absolutely no idea what she should do now and how to proceed, because the tears did not stop and flowed from her eyes in a stream. Sally couldn't calm down, as if all her feelings had become like bare wires that couldn't be touched. She decided that first she needed to eat and gain strength, and from that moment on she would have to do an incredible number of things on which her future would depend. The next morning, life in Viscount Daphne was going on as usual, but without the main member of the family. The daughter told her mother that she had checked all the land lease books overnight, and her mother thought that she had really done a good job. But no matter how much the heroine did, as if there was no end to these things, they still didn't end there, and as soon as she was distracted a little, she did an incredible amount. While she remained in the dominions to conduct her father's funeral, there was no news from His Majesty the Emperor, and Bentoje decided to stay here for a while. Suddenly, she remembered an urgent matter and decided to go out for a while, promising her mother that she would return soon. A lot of money came from somewhere as an offer of condolence, and for their family it was an exorbitant amount, and only one person came to the girl's mind. Celia went straight to Ben and decided to find out some questions from him that interested her. She thanked them for their kindness to their family, but admitted that she could not accept such a large sum of condolences. The young man admitted that he had been thinking about what she said yesterday for a long time, but he had come to his own decisions about it. Deciding not to hesitate any longer, he wanted to talk about everything that had happened between them over the long years. And the fact that she became so restless then means that all this time she truly did not love him. He asked her not to forgive him, because now he didn't care even if she didn't love him, because he wanted to make her love him again and regain her trust. The words she most wanted to hear after realizing her feelings for His Serene Highness the Archduke. He promised to prepare a lavish wedding so that from now on everyone would know that she belonged only to him. The young man also decided to make an official proposal of marriage and send it to the Viscount's house. Now all he wanted was for Sally to open her heart to him again, and for everything to be as before. But the heroine felt terribly disgusted with herself that she was again ready to give in to his words, not knowing whether they were sincere or just a passing whim. She embraced the gentleman tenderly, as before, because they were connected by too much to just give it all up like that. Feeling his embrace, which was close again, she suggested that he do as his soul tells him. But for some reason the heroine was not at all happy at that moment, and she did not understand whether this meant that she was now using it too. This thought alone made their hearts clench even more, but that very moment when they kissed again and felt the warmth of their beloved lips was so happy. However, the mother wanted her daughter to marry a man who would truly make her happy. Moreover, she did not want to approve of the person associated with the death of her father, and things did not go as smoothly as she would have liked. A few days ago, the Archduke sent a proposal of marriage, but Mother fiercely opposed it. When she broke up with Ben earlier, that was also part of the plan, so the Emperor didn't really react. But now, if news of the wedding spreads, that the marriage with the Duke fell through because of the mother's resistance, then the Emperor might harm her first. The lady was outraged that this young man had neglected her for 6 whole years, and now suddenly decided to act differently. The daughter tried to express her words, but her mother did not even want to listen to her, and did not believe her one bit anymore. She just angrily handed her the envelope and asked her to look at its contents right now. It contained a proposal from the young Lord Pendragon, and he says that he wants to marry her. Mother immediately warned that if she did not marry the young Lord Pendragon, the path to the capital would be forever closed to her. And if she doesn't want this, then she can simply remain in the domain from now on, forever alone and abandoned by everyone. The next day, it was not the young Lord Pendragon who came to her, but a completely different man. It was the Archduke whom Celia had met with her mother, who so desperately did not want to see him. The young man turned to Viscountess Daphne with a statement that he did not give her a choice, having decided to take her daughter himself. The heroine did not expect at all that the young man could act in such a rude manner, and she was afraid of what could happen to her mother. She thought for a moment and remembered that she had seen this situation in the original novel, and it happened when the young man decided to marry Lucalina. Then the Emperor told his younger brother that if he really married this girl, he would dare to kill him, and his older brother now did not give him a choice, and the young man had only one way out. He imagined the sword at his younger brother's throat so that he would finally understand that he had no right to power here at all. He declared that if he tried to interfere with his decision, even if he was his only brother, and even if he was the Emperor, still, the young man is ready to kill his own brother without hesitation and take Lucalina as his wife. But now he was speaking the same words, but instead of the name Lucalin, there was now the name Selenia. The original plot was incredibly distorted, and this happened because the heroine changed the future. And if this is so, then his lordship chose not Lucalina as his wife, but her, just a secondary character. I hope he doesn't change his mind now, because the House of the Viscounts has one right to immunity. The foundation of Helios, received from the imperial family, grants freedom from any crime except the murder of a member of the imperial family. To reject the proposal by members of the imperial family, using their right to immunity, would be to openly confront the Archduke himself. Mother stated that during the long years of his relationship with her daughter, he never once mentioned the engagement, and the love story between him and the lady from the Marquise's family was so well known that the entire high society of the country was in an uproar. And did he really think that she didn't know why he wasn't going to take the village as his wife? And it turns out that even his parents knew about it. Mother asked how long his love would last, because if his love for Lady Elihan had died down, everything could change in an instant. The heroine thought that her parents were not at all interested in social life and did not know, but it turned out that they had not been hiding it all this time, pretending so as not to hurt their daughter. And this unfortunate accident with the carriage happened precisely because of her marriage, and there can be no other reasons here. The young man stated that there were reasons that he could not explain now, but that he really loved Sally was the purest truth. Reasons that cannot be spoken cannot be more important than a daughter, and the mother was absolutely sure of this. The headmaid announced the arrival of guests, and Mother needed to leave for a short while. She asked for forgiveness and decided to end this conversation for a while in order to go out to the uninvited guests. She asked her daughter to end the conversation and leave without delay, because this funeral was also an opportunity to introduce the next head of the house to people. The young gentleman's soul was filled with a variety of emotions, and he didn't even know what words to choose to express everything he felt. Their relationship began wrongly, so Celia from the very beginning refused the love of His Grace the Duke and kept silent. But now she allowed this option, if the young man had really been in love with her for a long time, and he made that scandal to test her feelings. But even if so, her father still died because of her, and she didn't know if she could truly love him again. Now she felt only terrible hatred towards him, and frankly admitted this to the Archduke. The young man insisted that he had been wrong all this time, but the girl asked to give her a little time to think, to weigh everything adequately and understand. The original plot has already changed, so you shouldn't expect any deep feelings from the young man, and for her it will be at least some kind of payment for the fact that she deceived him. The heroine silently left the room, and the young man asked her to stay and wait, but she did not want to hear him. He still had something to say, and because of his strong emotions, he was completely unable to control his behavior. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw in front of him the young master of the young Lord Pendragon, who had recently sent the girl a marriage proposal. Mother noticed that the two seemed to get along well, and the maid even thought that they were right for each other, and they said that the young lord had already proposed to his mistress. Sally seemed to feel safe when she was around this man, even though they had only known each other for a short time. The Archduke looked at the pair of them intently, his body shaking with anger, and he incredibly wanted to punch this young man right in the face. He understood that his girlfriend could be taken by someone else, and she could soon refuse his proposal of marriage. Celia invited Pendragon to stay at the estate for a while, and showed him a room he could occupy. The young man said that he actually wanted to confess something, and now was the perfect time. The thing is that he is soon leaving for the Kingdom of Spain, and has absolutely no idea when he will be able to return. It was an order from His Majesty the Emperor, and he could not refuse, planning to stay there for about 5 long years in the Imperial Embassy. Celia heard the young master's words. She could not understand the reason why he decided to tell this. He asked if she would agree to go with him to the kingdom as his bride. There the girl could start a new life, forgetting about the past fears and tragedies that filled her soul. Although this place was not very romantic, the young man was confident in his decision. He declared that he had long admired Lady Daphne and was ready to spend the rest of his life with her, in happiness, love, and mutual understanding. So, until the lady's heart stopped beating for His Serene Highness the Archduke, he promised that he would wait for her forever. In his eyes she saw sincerity and kindness, realizing that with this man she could truly be happy and calm. In fact, the fact that he became her partner at the last ball was not an order from His Majesty, but his personal request. He really liked this girl, kind, sweet, and caring, and he really wanted to be close to her. The Lord had no intention of forcing her into marriage, offering simply to be a bride, and if she did not like him or fell in love with another, he promised to let her go at any moment. The young man did not expect an answer right now and was ready to humbly await her decision. That's why he suggested talking in more detail after the funeral, because he understood that the girls needed to rest properly after the grief they had experienced. It was the first night after her father's death, and the heroine felt as if she were in a dream, because she always wanted someone to pull her out of this terrible place. Even if she spent 5 years in the distant Kingdom of Spain, she couldn't even imagine whether it would ever end or not. She wanted to run somewhere without looking back and forget forever about the events that had recently happened, as well as the fact that she was the Emperor's puppet. The real freedom she so desired appeared in her hands, and she did not understand why she could not start living an ordinary but happy life. But the heroine knew that this was a dream that would never come true, because now she was in the power of another man, the most powerful in this empire. While she is in the hands of the Emperor, this is not allowed, because she now has absolutely no right to decide her own fate. And although the Lord was not at all like His Grace the Archduke, she could not drag him into the same quagmire in which she had found herself all her life. On the day of the funeral of her father, Viscount Daphne, distinguished guests gathered, to whom Mother was sincerely grateful for their presence. All the guests sincerely expressed their condolences over the loss of the head of the family, and each of them truly experienced the grief of others. Celia had not even expected that this tragic day would come so soon, but now she was trying to maintain her strength and faith in a happy future. The funeral was also attended by the Lord who had recently proposed to her, and he expressed his sincere condolences to the mother and her daughter. And his lordship, the Duke, was also at the funeral, and it turned out that he also wanted to talk to her, but now the heroine needed to focus on conducting the funeral with dignity. Suddenly, she noticed a familiar gentleman who was probably close to her father. She sincerely thanked him for attending the funeral, as it must have been difficult for him to get there in such rainy weather. But suddenly, a loud voice was heard, and the arrival of His Majesty the Most Honorable Emperor was announced. No one could believe that the emperor showed up at the funeral of an ordinary family, because such a thing had never happened before. His appearance came as an incredible surprise to everyone present, and until he showed up near the mansion, no one could even believe it. People whispered that His Majesty the Emperor came to the Viscount's funeral to express his condolences, and for some reason even showed up in person. The funeral of the father, which should have taken place in quiet sorrow, was now held with the greatest man of the empire. Together with his subjects in white robes, the emperor rode up to the courtyard of the mansion on a majestic horse. But the Archduke came out to meet him and, putting his hand forward, asked everyone to wait a little. He ordered the guards to step back, and from that moment on offered to accompany His Majesty himself. The emperor did not understand what his brother was allowing himself to do, but now was not the time for a quarrel to break out between them. The young man said that with these people the funeral would only become more hectic, and besides, he was better suited to the role of accompanying His Majesty, so he decided to accompany him himself. The emperor considered his behavior to be insolent, and in 1 second, a wave of misunderstanding arose between the brothers. The young man said that he would accept punishment for his insolence later, but now he had no intention of backing down. The emperor did not understand why his short brother had suddenly become so insolent, since he had previously behaved completely differently. But he roughly understood his intention, but the emperor had his own goals and plans. Declaring that the young man would have to prepare for punishment later, he turned away from his brother. Since the Archduke was of a lower rank, he had no choice but to carry out His Majesty's order and bow before him with respect. Everyone was incredibly scared, thinking that something terrible would happen because His Majesty the Emperor arrived unexpectedly, and everyone thought that he appeared here because of his brother. But it was good that the Archduke stopped the knights so as not to make even more noise at the funeral, and the Emperor appeared alone. The heroine was sure that the Emperor had come to warn her about further events, and as soon as he was near, she began to feel incredibly sick, and she knew that the Archduke could not be blamed for her father's death. So as not to destroy what had been done so far, thanks to the efforts of her mother and her. But as soon as the Emperor appeared at the funeral, the heroine became very ill. She was shaking all over, and she was very nauseous. The Lord approached her and noticed that the girl looked very bad, and she looked at him with incredible horror in her eyes, as if she didn't even recognize his face. She turned to the young Lord Pendragon and understood that this could not go on any longer, and that it was necessary to tell him directly that she could not become his bride. It was impossible to hurt such a kind man even more, and only now did she realize that he was so similar to the man who had been her first love. The same one, kind and sincere, who taught her to feel with all her heart and give herself to another without looking back. But as soon as the heroine thought about this, she stopped her thoughts to weigh everything adequately. If you think about it, the similarities here were not only in this, but in the manner of speech, character, and even appearance. This certainly couldn't happen, because at first she thought that the Emperor simply granted Lord Pendragon's request in order to provoke the Archduke. But in fact, the Emperor was going to test her from the very beginning, and all this time he controlled her every action and knew what she would do next. Lord Pendragon could not have been unaware of this plan, which meant that she could give her answer right now by declaring that she would not be able to enter into any relationship with the young lord. The young man did not expect the girl to refuse so quickly, and even asked the lady to think a little more, but Celia confidently replied that she had already thought enough and had made a final decision that would never change again. She needed to continue to receive people wishing to express their condolences, so the heroine admitted that she had to leave. She heard a familiar voice behind her and realized that the Archduke was standing right behind her and calling her name. He wanted to ask for forgiveness because he was sure that His Majesty had probably come here because of him. He also asked for forgiveness for disturbing the peace at her father's funeral. It seems that the young man is constantly creating situations that require him to apologize later. In fact, the heroine did not expect at all that he would go against the Emperor, declaring that he should not enter and should wait nearby. In the novel, the Archduke also waited patiently until he became Lucalina's lover, but he never interfered or contradicted His Majesty the Emperor. But now, for his own sake, he had brought punishment upon himself from the Emperor, and it was completely unknown what the Emperor would decide to do with them, and whether this meant that he was incredibly fond of this girl, because now he had gone against his brother and his high title in order to maintain the atmosphere at the funeral. After the matter with Lord Pendragon came to light, the heroine did not understand whose sincerity she should trust now. Besides, even if she takes a place next to Ben instead of the main character of the novel, they will end up getting married, and she will never be able to love him. Suddenly she heard the singing of His Majesty the Emperor's bird, and realized that he was waiting in her room. The heroine felt that she was not ready yet in the office, and did not understand what she should do now. At that moment, the Archduke unexpectedly approached her and whispered to her to stop, suspecting something was wrong. It didn't sound like a simple bird singing, and the young man, being a swordmaster, seemed to have already sensed someone's presence. But if he enters the room right now, he could be in danger, and the heroine will be unable to change anything at all. Just as he was about to enter the room with his sword, Celia grabbed him tightly by the waist and asked him to stop. She begged him not to do it under any circumstances, just to stay next to her, just not to go into that room. She also felt that something sinister was waiting in that room, and they went into her room until the girl stopped being nervous. Fortunately, after some time, the young man admitted that he no longer felt that danger, and it was probably possible to go there again. Celia had just about given away that she was closely connected to His Majesty. If the young man had entered that room, he would have learned the whole truth about her, and that would have been the end of her. The young man assumed that the lady was probably very worried, so he promised to stay next to her until she fell asleep. The lady was incredibly grateful for his care, but her room was so cramped, and she was not sure if it would be comfortable for them to stay there together. But now for the gentleman it was completely unimportant, because just now the girl looked so worried that she definitely needed to rest. Eventually, she only calmed down when she was near the master, so she asked if he didn't mind if she wanted him to stay. Kneeling down in front of the girl, the young man admitted that he was ready to do everything for her happiness and safety. And he was absolutely sure that he was exactly the person she needed, and in the future he would be able to help her in any situation. He also saw her reject Lord Pendragon's advances, and if she hadn't refused, he would have gone ahead and killed the guy. Perhaps the heroine simply imagined herself at that moment, but suddenly she felt some kind of eerie feeling that she couldn't even describe. The young man decided to confess something, and for a long time he did not want to tell Celia, but now the right moment had come. He confidently declared that he was not going to give her to anyone else, and none of the young men would dare to stand in the way of their happiness. For some reason, a cold aura was emanating from him now, and it made even the girl a little scared. He declared that anyone who wanted to be with her would be sent straight to the depths of hell, from which there would be no escape. The young man asked the girl if she knew that while they were dating, she had received countless love letters, but he could not allow them to reach her. Each time he took these letters and furiously burned them to ashes because he could not accept that someone dared to covet his beloved, and he wanted to break the wrist of everyone who wrote sweet lines about love. But now he admitted that he decided not to do that anymore because he has changed a lot lately. However, now a completely different relationship could have developed between them because each of them was completely different. The Archduke didn't care at all, even if she didn't love him, because he was still sure that they would be together forever. He was even only ready for the girl to simply tolerate him, but always remain close by and never dare to belong to anyone else. Looking at her old new lover, out of great fear of the Emperor, she completely forgot that Mr. Veneluccia was also the hero of a dark novel. The next day, a bright sun shone over the place, which marked the beginning of a new happy day. People still came to honor the memory of their deceased father, and his daughter sincerely thanked everyone for their condolences. Now she did not understand how she could have forgotten one important point that she had known about for a long time. What kind of people were these brothers? When Clifford, who used all sorts of tricks to get the heroine Lucalina in opposition to him, Veneluccia was always kind and gentle to her. However, in the end, at some point he also began to show an obsession with the heroine, because this is the world of an unusual romantic novel. There was no way to get out of this world anyway, and in this case the heroine understood that she could only do one thing. Soon after the funeral, she met with the Lord who had wanted to talk to her about something the last time. She decided to say everything directly, while the young man was preparing to listen to her with special attention. The heroine admitted that she knew he had approached her on the orders of His Majesty, but the young man replied that he did not understand at all what was being discussed, while the heroine knew perfectly well that he should understand everything. And since she knew this, she asked him to calculate that he had failed His Majesty's mission. The young man asked what the girl wanted from him, because her words were indeed true. Her request was quite simple. It was necessary to go and tell His Grace the Archduke that Lady Daphne had declined the Lord's offer, and she gave the reason that she loved another, and these were the exact words he should have repeated. In this case, the young man will not be punished by His Majesty the Emperor, and will be able to continue his normal, happy life. In this way, Celia wanted to escape the Emperor's suspicion for a while in order to quietly honor the memory of her late father with a minute of silence, standing next to his coffin. People whispered and found it strange that his lordship and the Duke were still at the funeral, but many heard that the girl had broken off the relationship. Since the Emperor had arrived, everyone expected some interesting spectacle, but everything turned out differently. No one understood why the venerable Archduke of the Empire was so desperately clinging to the daughter of some Vint. The young man tried in every way to pay attention to the girl so that she would not keep all the bitterness of the loss to herself and would simply talk to him. For some reason, Selenia felt incredibly nauseous all this time and seemed to be completely unable to communicate with anyone. She asked for forgiveness and pulled her hand out of the young man's hands, declaring that she had nothing to talk about with him. She did not understand what was happening to her because the young man was not an emperor, but after yesterday their images were constantly superimposed on each other in her perception. The mother approached her daughter and asked permission to take Celia away from him so she could talk for a while. Everyone was interested in what the Viscountess would say about this because, according to rumors, she did not like this young man very much. Still, the difference in status played a big role. Nothing can be done about it, and even his mother will play along with him in the midst of such a mess. Suddenly, Celia told the young man in front of everyone that they said that Lady Elihan had recently returned. The young man did not understand why Celia was starting this conversation, since they seemed to have already put everything in its place. The heroine admitted that since she had returned to the place where he truly loved, he should stop acting so selfishly with her. The young man never expected to hear these words right at the funeral, but there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. Judging by her reaction, he stated that the conversation would be even more necessary and suggested that the girl step away for just 1 minute. He grabbed her hand abruptly, right in front of everyone, right at her father's funeral. Those present gasped in fear because the lady clearly made it clear that she did not want to talk to him. Celia asked the Archduke to stop and calm his ardor, since now was not the time for his raging emotions. But the Emperor was keeping a close eye on all this, and he only came here to see what was really going on between his brother and this girl. The Archduke decided to take Lady Celia to a safe and quiet place in the courtyard of the mansion. He gently took her hand, smiled carefully, and, leading her behind him, headed to a secluded corner to just talk. The young man woke up. He did not want to take the girl away by force, and sincerely asked her for forgiveness. The nobles were humiliating her without reason, so he couldn't just stand there and listen to their stupid talk towards a girl they knew absolutely nothing about. The heroine had no control over her destiny and did not understand why everything had to happen exactly this way. As he said before, he was ready to do everything so that they could be happy together again. And now, to get her, he was ready to do anything, even if his own life was at stake. When her father's funeral ended today, he wanted to return to the capital with her to live a quiet family life. He warned her that if she couldn't marry him right now, he asked her to at least be near him and not run away anywhere. There was despair and sadness in his gaze, but Celia could not believe whether his feelings were true and whether he could be trusted now. She was ready to marry him, but she had no idea what fate awaited her in the future and whether this would be the worst decision in her life. Thinking that she had really gone crazy, looking at his gaze directed at her, her heart fluttered strangely. Her head screamed that she shouldn't get close to this man, against whom both her mother and father were, but for some reason, inexplicable feelings for him still glimmered in her. She tried to collect her thoughts, because in the end, her life and the life of her only beloved mother were in the hands of the Emperor, even though she had decided not to truly love him. The fact that she must marry him still remains unchanged, and it seems that she has fallen into one of the traps that she set herself. Therefore, now the heroine's thoughts were confused, and she was completely unable to understand her true feelings towards this man. But holding his hand tightly now and looking into his eyes, she agreed to be with him because she saw absolutely no other option. Celia smiled and promised to go to the capital together as soon as she sorted out her father's funeral and important land matters. As soon as he found her consent, he was incredibly happy, as if he had really been waiting for this all his life. The Archduke hugged his beloved tightly around the waist and was ready to go with her anywhere, as long as she was by his side. Tossing her into the air like a fragile twig, he thanked her with all his heart for giving him another chance. He was looking forward to the fact that they would finally return to the capital together and start a new life together, without resentment or disappointment. The main character's many years of efforts finally bore fruit, and she really wanted this story to end happily. She was truly happy about this, because for all 6 years she had trusted this man and had been so close to him, sincerely opening her heart to him. At that moment, his heart was filled with peace, as if the whole world had disappeared, leaving only the two of them. He held her in his arms with gratitude and trepidation, enjoying this rare and precious moment that would forever remain in his memory. The next day, a carriage appeared near the courtyard of Senelia's townhouse, and probably an important meeting was to take place there. However, everything turned out to be not as simple as the heroine had assumed. Strange events awaited her again. As if to mock the patience of her mother, who had with difficulty allowed her to travel to the capital, she ended up arriving in the capital alone. But according to the plan, they were supposed to arrive together with the young man, but during the trip everything turned out completely differently than it should have. An hour ago, they were riding calmly in a carriage with the Archduke, and he, leaning on her shoulder, was impatiently awaiting their arrival in their native lands. He wanted to prepare something for Sally in advance that she wanted to do in the capital, and he immediately asked about it. But everything was going smoothly until one moment when the Archduke was told unexpected news that completely turned their trip upside down. Recently, an attempt was made on Lady Elihan's life, and as soon as it happened, the gentleman was immediately informed about it. A maid who had previously served Luna came to them and asked for forgiveness for the disturbing news, saying that only a young man could save the lady, which was why she had come here. The maid, with tears in her eyes, asked the young man to help the girl, and if things continued like this, something terrible could happen. She insisted, because he knows that only he can help the lady, and he should definitely go to the scene. And by accident, Sally went to the capital alone, and he went to where the main character was. Celia thought it was inevitable, but for some reason she felt a strong sense of anxiety that she couldn't shake off. She also couldn't believe why Lucalina was attacked right now, when they were supposed to calmly arrive in the capital. According to the knight, it is assumed that this was also done by the people whom Lucalina once expelled from the Empire by force. But it was too sudden an attack, which definitely could not have happened at that exact moment, at that exact time, and with her. It was as if someone had staged the attack, and the heroine was sure that someone was definitely behind it. But soon, a sudden meeting with the person she wanted to see the least in her life awaited her. The Emperor already knew that Ben had gone to help Luna after all, and upon entering the room, the heroine saw a respectable gentleman in front of her, who was clearly already waiting for her. Falling to her knees, she greeted the son of the Empire, His Majesty the Emperor, as befitted the rules of etiquette. The Emperor said that they had not seen each other for a long time, and his cold gaze sent goosebumps through the girl. Now that this child had run away to another girl, the Emperor asked to know whether it was really so difficult to win the heart of his younger brother. Celia felt absolutely terrible, but in this situation she could do absolutely nothing, because Luna supposedly needed the help that the maid was begging for. She assured him that the Archduke would soon be hers if the Emperor gave her a little more time, but suddenly he declared that he had waited long enough and had now changed his mind. He asked the girl if she knew that all the thorns of the Chlorochaean from past generations had extraordinary abilities. The heroine was already so tired of feeling pain and disappointment, and the fear at the sight of the Emperor completely brought her into a terrible state. He said that their offspring also usually inherited these talents, and the girl probably also had abilities that he knew absolutely nothing about. It is unlikely that they are so great that they would help to escape from the Emperor, because the imperial family would not be hindered by someone who could give birth to an extraordinary child. Celia felt like she was in the clutches of a cruel and treacherous emperor, but she was just an ordinary girl, a pathetic puppet that he controlled. The Emperor decided to give her a new choice, and taking the girl's chin in his hand, he wanted to look her straight in the eyes. Unexpectedly, he offered her to become the main empress of the entire empire, and from now on to be the ruler with him, always being close by and obeying him in everything. The Emperor seemed to be pursuing completely different goals, and it was no accident that throughout the entire time he did not let this girl go far from him. And the more he looked at her, the more he realized that this lady was very much to his taste, and her sweet face gave him no peace. The heroine was not just submissive, but someone who could be manipulated as one pleased, simply put, an obedient and useful person, which the emperor needed so much. In addition, he is probably attracted by the abilities of the child that will be born from her, and now the heroine is so afraid of her future that she thinks it would be better if she died. As far as she knew, the emperor from the original was also obsessed with Lucalina, but the plot of the original changed again, and now Celia was in his sights. Suddenly, quiet footsteps were heard in the mansion, and the emperor realized that it seemed his beloved younger brother had returned. He promised to talk next time and instantly disappeared outside the window so that his brother would never see him there. After meeting the emperor, the heroine seemed to have caught her breath, and her whole body was shaking with fear, as if she had seen the most terrible thing she could. In the moment of danger, the Archduke saved her without hesitation, but at the first call he ran to another woman, and now, returning to her, he saved her again. She could not accept that under all these circumstances she should want to marry him, because all this was unbearable and simply pathetic. Lady Celia felt herself at the mercy of others, their views and intrigues, as if an invisible chain was holding her captive. And inside, she felt a desire to free herself from this pressure, not wanting to become a hostage to cruel circumstances and the games of fate. She was able to get up at about the time when the young man could wait no longer, and knocked on her door, but he had already heard that the girl had suddenly fainted. When she woke up, her mind was clearer than ever, so she immediately realized her situation. She could not escape the clutches of the emperor and the Archduke, and her heart longed for freedom and her own choice, to go through life her own way, and not obey other people's rules and expectations. If her destiny was to choose between the two of them, she would choose the Archduke, with whom she could at least breathe freely. And she also really wanted to save her life, and first of all the life of her mother, being next to him. But for the young man, Lucalin always remained an unchanging constant, and the only one to blame for this was the damned original, which could not be changed. When he chose her instead of the original's main character, she thought she had escaped that destructive fate. But she was again suddenly overcome by a strong despair that everything would end up going according to the original, as if she were shackled by parodies with thorns that firmly held every part of her body. Perhaps, because of the shackles of the original, she will never be able to become his true love and will never have sincere feelings for the Archduke. But now she was ready to remain for him at least as a desire, passionate and boundless, which he would crave every second. Usually in novels, love always wins over lust, and love takes first place over all other feelings, even incredibly strong ones. But she could become the first lust to conquer love and forever escape from this unfortunate fate. And if she shows such determination, the emperor may refuse his offer to make her empress and will forget about her existence forever. Celia was going to first hold this man's heart, which could swing like the original's main character, although she didn't want to do that again. But it seemed that now she would have to reconsider her decision to be with him, and she was ready for any emotions that the young man would show towards her after these words. She said that her hours can last for as long as she wants, but she is too worried about Lady Lucalina, who immediately runs at the first call. The young man couldn't understand. They had discussed everything a long time ago, but for some reason the girl still didn't believe him and was afraid that he would run away to another. After all, they had already decided everything a long time ago, and he promised to always be with her, not paying attention to any other girls. It was a fleeting agreement, and the heroine assured him that the gentleman still could not forget her, and what happened today could happen again. She admitted that she would not be able to bear it again. Her heart would simply break into pieces, and the young man, accustomed from birth to receiving everything for granted, would certainly be tormented by these words alone. He turned away and said that the girl was probably too emotional and nervous right now, and that was why she was saying such words. Celia once again stated that she would not like to interfere in their relationship because she knows very well that they started for each other since childhood. But she wanted the young man to understand only one thing, that her heart could one day turn away, and in that case, nothing would ever work out between them again. Just one moment and one situation can decide their future fate, and this time the heroine did not remain silent and told the whole truth that was hidden in her soul. Perhaps her words were too harsh, but she was not going to act differently now because she knew very well what this could lead to in the future. Looking at the angry young man, at the possibility of becoming his desire and at the fact that she could still hook him, she trembled. The heroine always trusted her feelings and emotions, and every day it seemed to her that she was driving herself into that very miserable trap, from which it would then be very difficult to get out. Thus, after these words, she became the ideal villain of the novel, and this was her main role. The capital was buzzing with a welcoming banquet for Lucalina's return, and Celia also received a special invitation. For some reason, Lucalina sent her an invitation since they had not even met, and asked her to honor an event that was significant to her with her presence. So many years had passed since then that the memories of the original had already faded, and the heroine was puzzled why, after the girl's return, they never held a banquet. The Emperor's men were constantly watching her, so the heroine couldn't even write anything down anywhere, but of course, an interesting incident awaited her at the banquet. While the girl was reading the invitation, unexpected memories associated with the upcoming event appeared in her head. She suddenly remembered that Lucalina's welcoming banquet was the key place where a very important event took place that changed her destiny. There she confessed her love to Mr. Venelucci, right in front of all high society, and from that moment their love story began. An invitation to a banquet in honor of the return of the moon. In the end, this day still came, no matter how the heroine tried to avoid it. At the banquet, in honor of her return in the original novel, Lucalina acted rather boldly to declare war on the Emperor. For a long time, the lady gathered her allies around her in order to finally overthrow the cruel ruler, and she put her lover in his place. She was not afraid of anyone at all, and her main goal was only to overthrow the imperial power so that this man would never again have the right to rule the empire. When all the guests were assembled, she asked him to say something and asked him to marry her, proposing in front of everyone. And there the Archduke must have been moved, because he had known this girl since childhood, and she was a very close person to him. He thanked Luna and also accepted her proposal of marriage, and after that they began to prepare for a happy wedding. Even though the heroine intended to ask the Archduke to give her time to think, if he now accepts Luna's offer, she will have no choice. Unlike the original, Ben is very hesitant because of her, and she had no idea if he would be able to accept her proposal so easily. But you can see how he gets mad every time Luna has any problems. She couldn't stay calm and would just like to avoid meeting this girl. She, holding fate tightly in her hands, is a heroine who is so different from Celia. And Celia was incredibly afraid of how pathetic she would look when she met her, timid, unsure of everything, a stupid puppet of the Emperor. The heroine tried to put her thoughts in order because she had absolutely no time to give in to her emotions, and in order to prevent the main character's confession, it was necessary to act as quickly as possible. The palace was preparing for the event dedicated to the return of Lady Luna, and everyone was waiting for this important event with excitement and anticipation because the return of Lady Luna meant a new beginning and hope for the entire kingdom. The first thing Ben met the girl was, and he was incredibly happy that she really came, because after they broke up, he felt uneasy for a long time. He was glad to see her again, and believed that she would go with him as his partner and appear before high society. The heroine was prepared for any outcome of events, but on this day she felt very confident, and knew that victory would definitely be on her side. Shortly after receiving the invitation from Lucalina, a letter immediately arrived from the Archduke offering to become his partner at the event. Her goal was to thwart Luna's proposal, because if she came as a partner, she would be able to act according to her own plan. So, at his request, she visited the Archduke's mansion today, and the young man even declared that he would like to show her something unusual. He carefully prepared for the event, and even bought a dress for the banquet in a luxury salon, really hoping that the girl would like it. As soon as the young man opened the wardrobe door, Lady Celia could not believe her eyes, because it was a special dress. This was a dress that only a duchess of the House of the Archdukes could wear, and if the young man offered to wear it to her, it meant that in high society she would be recognized as a future archduchess. But if the heroine wears this dress, it will attract unnecessary attention and all eyes will be directed only to her. Celia said that this dress was too luxurious for her, and unfortunately she would not be able to wear it to the upcoming banquet. The young man insisted that the lady was quite worthy of wearing it, even if it was so luxurious, but Celia did not want to become the subject of gossip for many people. Not expecting at all that Sally would refuse to put it on, he continued to look with a sad gaze at the luxurious garment in which he already imagined his future bride. She suggested that she instead order a dress from the Imperial Palace designer, and Madame Langapour would create a dress that would also suit her well. But as the daughter of a simple viscount, Celia could not afford to wear a dress from an imperial court designer. And the lady was indignant. If the young man continued to insist, she would simply come in her most ordinary dress, and the young man understood that this time the girl was serious, and it was necessary to find an approach to her. He offered to listen to her, and she would wear a dress from a designer he would recommend, asking her not to worry and promising to choose a designer not associated with the imperial court. The imperial court dress would cause unnecessary gossip until their relationship became official, but it was worth giving in, at least in this, so that the young man would not be upset. The young man was incredibly glad that they had come to at least some kind of decision, and hugging his girlfriend, he looked forward to how they would appear together in high society. In Ben's arms, the heroine at that moment did not know that she would soon regret this choice, but this would only become known later. They went to Madame Tangeroude's studio in the capital, but to her great surprise, she met someone she hardly wanted to see now. For some reason, it was in this very salon that Lady Lucalina was located, and the seamstresses were taking measurements for a dress for an upcoming event. She asked the girls to take a little rest, and the heroine did not understand at all what she was doing there right at that moment. Looking at the Archduke's companion, Luna asked if this was really the same Lady Daphne. The heroine had never seen the moon in real life, and she looked exactly the same as in the original. Never discouraged, confident, and even elegant in her demeanor, this girl was perfect in everything. But in the original, Lucalina definitely ordered the outfit from Lady Tongerwood in a completely different salon, because she always ordered clothes from Madame Carlot's atelier, which was run by her relatives. Therefore, fearing that Venelucci and Lucalina would collide, the heroine avoided Carlot's studio, even when she was alone. And despite all these days today, they both met in Madame Tongerot's studio, like destined lovers. Apparently, this event could not be avoided, and Celia stood behind the gentleman, waiting to see how their communication would develop. The young man covered the girl with his body and apologized to Luna, promising to introduce Celia officially later at her event. Luna asked him with a wary look what he was trying to achieve and why he was so openly hiding her behind his back. And did he really think that she could harm Lady Daphne? But the young man said that this was not the case at all. At this point, the heroine decided to take matters into her own hands and asked Lady Alekan for forgiveness because it seemed that his lordship had misunderstood everything, and she had not introduced herself right away, so the girl came out proudly and said her name was Selenia Daphne. Finally, the two main characters stood opposite each other, and Luna politely said her name, which the other probably already knew. For some reason, Luna looked very intently at Celia, and she only smiled sweetly and tried not to take her eyes off her, holding herself proudly. In any case, she was sure that she did not belong here, and immediately after meeting him, she turned to the young man. She said that it seemed he had something to talk about with Luna, so she decided to return to the capital first today. Luna sincerely thanked the girl, saying that she just needed to talk to him, and she was very glad that she had bravely decided to do such a thing. Leaving them alone was a bit unsettling, but Celia's presence here would also be quite strange, especially since she would feel uncomfortable. So Celie bowed proudly and declared that she would leave the salon first, and the young man could stay here as long as he wished. Luna was incredibly happy that she would finally be able to talk to the young man, who had been difficult to reach all this time. But the young man did not hear Luna's words at all, and only took the hand of the girl, whom he did not want to let go of at all now. The Archduke gently hugged Lady Celia in front of Luna, his arms gently encircling her shoulders as if trying to keep her close, his gaze filled with genuine concern and worry. While he still could not understand why she tried to run away from him every time, at that moment Luna clenched her fists in anger, realizing that this man would never be with her again, no matter how hard she tried to attract his attention, because his heart had long been occupied by another.